Good morning, everybody. Brian Newbert here from GoldandBlack.com with your GoldandBlack.com Purdue Basketball Daily for today, Thursday, October 26th. Sorry I'm a little late with this today. Having a little trouble with my Wi-Fi. I think Michigan stole my signal. Um, that's right. So today's topic, I just want to talk a little bit about Purdue's front court. It's not a new deal for Purdue where you have too many guys in your front court. It's not a new deal for Purdue where you have one of the better front courts in college basketball. Um, but that's the deal once again for Purdue. You look at this four-man group of Zach Edey, perhaps you've heard of him, Mason Gillis, Trey Kaufman-Ren, and Caleb Furst. That's a pretty good group right there. Don't take any offense to me not including Will Berg. I just don't think his time is now. I think it's perfectly reasonable to suggest that he kind of redshirts again this year. Maybe they get him some minutes at the end of blowouts or whatever. But I think a lot of things that wouldn't be ideal would have to happen this year for Purdue, for Wilberg to end up playing meaningful minutes. That doesn't mean he won't get opportunities down the line. I don't know. I can't predict the future, but for the time being, I think he kind of redshirts again this year, and that'll really help him. Another year practicing at Zach Edey and all that stuff is nothing but positive for him. And I think those other four guys, you're going to ride Zach Edey as far as you can. He's the best player in the country. He's the best returning player in the country, at least, and it's reasonable to expect him to be back, to be better this season. I was going to say back at the same level at least, but also be slightly improved from last season as well. Everything Purdue does goes through him, offensively, defensively, so on and so forth. I don't need to tell you to any great length that Zach Edey is really good. He is really good. He's again the best returning player in college basketball, the most dominant figure in college basketball, the most influential figure in college basketball, and he is Purdue's foundation. And around him, Purdue has a lot of good players. I think that Purdue's going to try to make this Trey Kaufman-Ren playing alongside Edey thing work. There's going to be some smoothing out there that has to be done. Coaches express no concern whatsoever about that working offensively. It's the players who mention the spacing as being a little bit complicated, but not something that can't be worked out. Defensively, there's going to be some real questions there, obviously. When you get bigger and bigger and bigger, and everybody else is getting smaller and smaller and smaller, there are always some offensive or defensive complications there. I think Mason Gillis, don't forget about him. He is sort of the consummate intangibles guy for Purdue. I think his experience really matters. I think he's one of Purdue's most vocal players, if not its most vocal player. He's shown in his career a knack for changing games with effort, with toughness, things like that. I think he's a real emotional tone setter for Purdue, and I think he's real substance. And I've always viewed him as like the ultimate complement to Zach Edey, in the sense that he just goes out there. He doesn't need the ball to make things happen. He's a good entry guy. He's a good shooter. I know his percentage last season wasn't ideal, but he is a good shooter. He's a good ball mover. He's rugged. Again, he just doesn't need the ball to be productive. And when you have Zach Edey, no one else is getting the ball as much as him. So I think it's always been worth Purdue's time to kind of tether those two together. But that's where Purdue wants more scoring on the floor, so that's why they're trying to do the Trey Kaufman-Ren and Edey thing. That doesn't mean that Mason Gillis can't be opportunistic on the offensive glass, can't be a lower volume spot up shooter and put points on the board, things like that. But I just think Purdue wants as much scoring potency on the floor as possible. I think it's important for Mason Gillis this year to not take that personally and not, get outside of what he is as a player. And then Caleb Furst. as I've written all about this team through the summer, I've probably not mentioned Caleb Furst as much as I ought to, because I'm not, I don't have the same level of certainty about where he fits in as I do the others. He is Purdue's backup center, but he is too good a player to play 8 minutes a game. On nights where Zach Edey can play that much. Purdue is going to use him, I think, still at the 4. That gives you 3 fours that are all, I think, starter caliber players. And that's sort of this thing Purdue keeps finding itself in this time of year, every year, where you just have too many guys and you have to just expect somebody to not play as much as they're worthy of playing, and needing those players to be mature and to be selfless and to just understand the bigger picture. That's a lot to ask of kids at this age, at this stage of their lives. But it's part of the reason Purdue's had so much damn success the last couple of years, is guys who've been in that situation have not acted out, have not been problematic. They have understood, maybe not liked it, but they have understood, and they have been productive about it. Caleb Furst is going to be, again, Purdue's backup center. I think Purdue can do very different things with him at center than they could with Zach Edey. Whether Purdue will or not, I don't know. But when Furst is at center, you're not going inside every single time the way you would with Edey. But it would help if Caleb Furst gets his 3-point touch back after it kind of went sideways on him last season. But that's not really as big a deal for him as him just being confident, him just being assertive. I went back last night just for some added context as this season approaches and watched Purdue's win over Duke and Portland. I think people forget how good Caleb Furst was in that game. He was unbelievable. Unbelievable is probably a little bit of an overstatement, but relative to his role, Caleb Furst was an enormous part of that win. And for a guy who was not one of your top 2 or 3 players, to have that sort of influence in that big a game tells you what he's capable of. And I've always kind of viewed Furst as a guy too who can really be a valuable energy guy, the same way Mason Gillis has been. But he just plays so hard, and he's so energetic, and things like that. That he can also be a really good intangible guy as well. Again, you'd like to be able to play some pick and pop with him because he's a skilled shooter. He's a better passer than he's had an opportunity to show at Purdue. I think it's been a little bit of a process for all those guys learning how to play next to Edey, things like that. But I do think Caleb Furst will be a better player this year than he was last year. The thing for him is he has to be confident. He has to feel good about himself. He has to be aggressive around the rim. And things like that, but I think he's capable of quite a bit this season in whatever role he plays, whether it's at the 4, whether it's at the 5, whatever. So, Trey Kaufman-Ren is that guy who might be on the verge of that jump, that move from being a really good guy for a freshman to being a great guy as a sophomore. And I don't mean great guy as far as character, I mean great player. Even though Trey Kaufman-Ren is great from a character perspective as well, I think he's going to be a guy who's really going to take a step up this season and really kind of put, I don't want to say put the Big Ten on notice, but kind of make his presence felt this season. And then on his way to being, one of Purdue's best guys the year after. I think you're going to get more scoring out of him. I think you're going to get just more of everything from him. He's got to improve defensively. He's got to maintain a presence on the boards. He's got to figure this out with Edey. He's got to make threes at least credibly enough to keep people honest from a defensive perspective. But he has, he was one of Purdue's best players this summer, if not its best player this summer. So Purdue's going to try to figure that out best it can in terms of giving him opportunities to show that in games when there's a logjam of guys around him. I would expect him just my guess. I have no idea who Purdue's going to start at Arkansas on Saturday, but I would expect him to be in that group just because he's had such a good summer. So once again, a good problem to have for Purdue in that front court. But, as I always say, good problems to have are still problems sometimes. And we'll kind of see how this all shakes out. But Purdue has 4 really good guys in its front court. Once again, on top of, some real promising guys at that 3 position too, which, I don't really count as front court because that position is more of a perimeter deal, more of a third guard situation than it is a true forward role. But it's those 5s and those 4s that, are really, really loaded spots for Purdue. So that's what I got. This has been your GoldandBlack.com Purdue Basketball Daily. I will have another video tomorrow before I head out to fly to Arkansas to cover the exhibition game this weekend. So if you haven't checked out GoldandBlack.com yet, I don't know what your problem is, but by all means, if you're going to join us, the time is now. The Furst starts flying here this weekend with actual games. I know it doesn't count, but it is an actual game. So by all means, if you haven't joined us yet, go ahead and check out GoldandBlack.com. I think you can get your first month for $1. Just $1. So thanks, everybody.